Mangold. I am the current GA for Wellbeing and Fitness. I have my bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University. I'm also a certified personal trainer and a certified health coach. If you are happening to be joining the meeting as I'm going through this, please remember to turn your cameras off and mute yourself as I am recording. All right, so let's get into it. So let's start with, why is water important? Why is staying hydrated important? What does water actually do for the body? So it functions in a variety of roles. As we know, our body is mostly comprised of water, so it's probably a pretty important thing to consume regularly. So for one, it flushes out bacteria via urine. It aids in digestion and prevents constipation. So with adequate water as well as fiber intake, regular bowel movements, it's also responsible for transporting nutrients and oxygen to the cell. Very important for nutrient partitioning, performance in the gym, just energy overall. It helps regulate your body temperature as well as your blood pressure and heart rate. So body temperature, if you are really hot, maybe sweating a lot, water is going to help cool you down, keep you at homeostasis. So very important in that regard. It also supports and protects internal organs, connective tissues, and joints. So like I said, our body is mostly comprised of water, so keeping everything lubricated and not dried out. We do not want dry tendons and ligaments. Those make us very, very prone to injury. So water is important in that regard. It also supports skin elasticity. So if you've ever had a sunburn and you're looking up what to do to get rid of sunburn, I bet you 9 times out of 10 you're going to see that you need to be drinking adequate amounts of water. We'll get into what an adequate amount of water is, but the reason for that is because your skin is dehydrated. And so supporting that with adequate water, drinking water, is going to help your skin elasticity, get rid of a potential sunburn. And it also potentially provides acne support. So if you ever notice, if you're not drinking a lot of water, maybe drinking mostly coffee, soda, pop, and then you start drinking water, your skin may clear up. It gives you a dewier, fresher look. And water is also really critical for electrolyte balance, which we will go into depth about in a little bit later on in the webinar. But water follows salt, so that'll be very important. Remember osmosis from like 7th grade biology. All right, moving on. So intake recommendations. So there's going to be a lot of different recommendations of how much water you should be drinking. Some is consistent, some is not. There's no really like, this is what you should be having. So you're going to see a lot of different hypotheses and suggestions. So the first one is from the National Academics of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. So in 2017, they suggested that men should have 15.5 cups of water, roughly 124 fluid ounces. That's about a gallon. A gallon of water is 128 fluid ounces. And then women should drink 11.5 cups, so 92 fluid ounces. So that's about 3/4 of a gallon, a little less than. Now, traditional recommendations, if you remember growing up, going to the doctor's office, you traditionally will hear 8 glasses of water a day. So 8 cups of water, each of those cups being 8 fluid ounces. These aren't, little paper cups, red Solo cups of water. 8 measured out, 8 fluid ounce cups of water is going to be 64 fluid ounces, or a half gallon. So that's kind of what traditional recommendations tell us that we typically hear. Another one that has gained more popularity in the past few years is to drink half your body weight in fluid ounces. So what does that mean though? So if you weigh 180 pounds divided by 2, you should drink 90 fluid ounces of water a day. So these different recommendations take into account different factors. So the first is taking into account biological sex. The second isn't really taking into account anything. It's just kind of just like baseline 8 cups of water a day. And the last one is taking into account your weight. So what are some factors that influence water recommendations? Well, we already kind of touched on weight. So the more you weigh, the more water you'll have to drink. You have just basically more mass of muscle, more mass of ligaments and tendons, and that all needs water to support it. Height plays a factor. So again, usually the taller are, maybe the more you weigh. Again, just more protective tissue that you need water to support. Age is also going to play into weight and height. So obviously a child is not going to be needing to drink as much water as a grown adult. So age is a factor. Biological sex, biological men typically need more water. That's based on hormones. So estrogen actually likes to hold on to water. So that's why a lot of times women will have a fuller look because estrogen likes water. It likes to hold on to it. Testosterone, on the other hand, helps burn calories. You might sweat more. And so therefore you're going to be losing more water. You'll have a drier look. So more water is typically required for those who have higher testosterone levels. Then we get into sweating or physical activity. So if you are regularly partaking in strength training, group fitness classes, yoga, CrossFit, anything like that, a sport, you're losing water as you sweat and as you go through that physical activity. So the amount of water that you drink should factor in how much physical activity you are getting. And the problem with the past 3 recommendations is that none of them did that. Another factor is outside temperature. So if you live somewhere like Arizona where you have dry heat, again, you're probably sweating a lot. It's easier to become dehydrated. That's going to influence how much water you should be drinking a day. If you live somewhere cooler, maybe somewhere with a little bit more humidity, you're not losing a lot of water through sweat necessarily, you may need to drink a little bit less water. Another factor is alcohol consumption. So alcohol is going to dehydrate you. It is kind of serves as a diuretic, so makes you pee more, so you're going to be losing a lot more water that way. So it's really important to make sure that you're staying properly hydrated if you are drinking. Either you need to be drinking water before consuming alcohol, while you're consuming alcohol, and after you're consuming alcohol. Another thing is medication. So some medications are diuretics, some medications are antidiuretics. So keeping in mind the kinds of prescriptions that you're using and medications that can influence how your body retains or flushes out water on a regular basis. So that's going to vary prescription to prescription, but that's another thing to keep in mind. And finally, your salt or electrolyte intake. So salt and water want to be balanced within the body. So making sure that, if right now you drink a lot of water, but maybe you don't have enough salt, that could actually lead to bloating. But also vice versa, if you're eating a lot of salt and not enough water, that can also lead to bloating. So there's a very delicate balance that you need, but they can both play into that. So when you eat a lot of salt, and you're not drinking a lot of water, whatever water that you are consuming, it's going to want to hold and retain within the body because your salt levels are so high that it wants to keep everything neutralized, right? But on the opposite side, if you don't have enough salt and you just have a lot of water, your body's going to hold on to the water as well because it doesn't have that salt to flush out. The water is going to follow the salt. So you need some sort of salt to flush out with water. Okay, moving forward. So what I like to use when I'm working with my clients who I coach, I like to use an equation approach to water intake recommendations. So this is going to be based on both your body weight and your activity levels. So the equation I like to use is your kind of pulling from that last equation. So your body weight divided by 2 plus 20 times N. Now, N is going to be the number of hours of physical activity, and then plus an additional 15. The unit for all this is fluid ounces. So your body weight divided by 2 plus 20 times the number of physical activity hours plus 15. So I'll go through a couple of examples here. The first example, let's say Gabby weighs 160 pounds. She's relatively sedentary. She trains for approximately 90 minutes and regularly sweats throughout the session. How much water should she aim to consume per day? So we're going to take her weight, 160, divided by 2, plus 20 times 1.5. So she works out 90 minutes, so that's an hour and a half. So 20 times 1.5 plus 15, that's going to get us 125 fluid ounces, which is essentially a gallon. A gallon, again, is 128 fluid ounces. So Gabby should be drinking about a gallon of water a day. For our next example, Nate weighs 220 pounds, and he trains for about an hour a day at a high intensity. How much water should he aim to consume per day? So again, we take his weight, 220 divided by 2, plus 20 times the number of hours he works out, which is 1, plus 15. That's going to give us 145 fluid ounces. So a little bit over a gallon. But yeah, so that is the equation approach that I personally like to use. Again, you can manipulate this based on all of those factors that we talked about. But what I like about this approach is that it takes into account your size, so your weight, which then also includes your height and your age, a little bit of biological sex in there, because all of those will factor into weight, and then your activity level, so how much water you're losing throughout the day. All right, so what if you're not drinking enough water? So I want to quickly go over some signs of dehydration. I think dehydration is more common than people think. A lot of times people think of just extreme dehydration, where you're passing out or you're fainting, but even low levels of dehydration are dangerous. So here are some signs and symptoms to look out for. So the easiest one to look for is dark colored urine. So if your urine is really dark yellow brown, orange, you are severely dehydrated and you need to drink some water. Another sign is a dry mouth, headache, so like a tension headache, lightheadedness, dizziness, thirst seems pretty straightforward, but yeah, thirst is a sign of dehydration. Dry and or cool skin, so losing some of that skin elasticity. The water, if you are dehydrated, will pull towards the inside of your body. Blurred vision, poor skin trigger. So for this, if you pinch your skin or you touch it, it'll become white, or like lighter colored. So if you pinch your skin, if it takes a long time for it to go back to its original color, you could be dehydrated. So that's also an easy thing to look for, along with urine color. And then lack of sweating. So if you're partaking in a high intensity workout, whether it's weight training, a cycle class, if you're doing hot yoga, if you're not sweating, that is a pretty telltale sign that you're probably dehydrated. Your body doesn't have enough water and it's reserved and retained to sweat, even though your heart rate is up, you're working hard, blood pressure is raised, but even with all of that, it doesn't have enough water to sweat out. That's not good because it could lead to overheating. Sweat is how our body cools itself down. So if you're not sweating during a workout, probably need to look at your hydration. All right, and finally, we're going to talk about water intake, salt, and its effects on performance. So even just a minor level of dehydration can result in a loss of performance, sometimes up to like 10% loss of performance. So it's really important to make sure you're hydrating before you work out, while you work out, and after you work out. It's just good for overall protection of your joints. It's good for nutrient partitioning, oxygen transportation, and just overall recovery. You need to replenish the water that you lost after physical activity. So the equation introduced earlier that I talked about, the body weight divided by 2 plus 20 times hours of physical activity plus 15. That takes into account physical activity, but again, that's also just a baseline for proper hydration. You know your body better than others, so keep in mind how you're physically feeling. Do you feel dehydrated? Do you feel lightheaded? That equation could say you need to drink 128, fluid ounces a day, but you've already had 128, but you're still not feeling great. You're feeling lightheaded. Your urine color is a little dark. You could still be dehydrated. It's just a baseline equation. So you can easily test again that skin turgor, and just always be aware of your urine color. If you're only peeing like once or twice a day, you're probably not getting enough water as well. So another factor that influences performance is sodium intake. Sodium is important for nutrient partitioning and transportation. Again, like I mentioned a little bit before, water will follow sodium. That's through osmosis. So drinking plenty of water but not consuming enough salt can also lead to lightheadedness, muscle cramps, and poor performance in the gym. So sodium is really, really important, especially while we are training. Helps with our action potentials. It's it's really, really important. Muscle cramps, if you've ever had one, a Charlie horse, they're not fun. That is a lack of electrolytes, a lack of sodium, a lack of potassium. Sodium is actually also responsible for the pump that you may experience while training. So when you're working out, there's a few things that'll happen. One, your blood vessels say you're working out your shoulders that day. As you're doing the shoulder presses, lat raises, front raises, your blood vessels are going to expand in that body part, in that area. And so more blood is going to be pumped into that area. So that's going to help with the pump. Also salt, so the sodium will flush into the muscle as well, to provide nutrients, and where sodium goes, water will follow. So as the sodium goes into the cell, to support that movement, then the water will follow. So water fills into the cell, again, gives it this swollen, pumped look as well. So just really important to make sure that your water intake and salt intake match each other and are going to optimize your performance, whether that's in the gym, on the field, in the group fitness class, wherever it may be, at home, wherever you choose to work out. So if anyone who watched through this presentation has any questions, comments, concerns, or would like the slideshow, the PowerPoint slides to this presentation, feel free to reach out to me. My Ohio email is rm810015@ohio.edu. Again, I am Rachel Mangold, the Graduate Assistant of Wellbeing and Fitness, and thank you for listening and listening through with this to me today. Have a great one. Bye.